Dear colleagues, good day. Gleb Bashlinsky, Executive Director of Center of Economical Strategy. We have our monthly review of the situation in Ukrainian economy. It consists of two parts. Part one, it's a review of economic tendencies for the last parts, and our special topic, which is absolutely and clearly obvious, the accession of Ukraine to EU, where the Ukrainian economy is ready to this accession. So this is we're waiting for most important decision in Brussels, in the EU Council, where there will be a start to negotiations on Ukraine joining EU. And notwithstanding to that decision, it's obvious that Ukraine will move rapidly to common market with EU, and both economic policies and business strategies should maximally consider that in their planning. That's what we will be talking about. We have a very experienced speakers, so budget your time until 6:30. We conduct this event together with the German economic team. This is a German government project that supports our initiative, and thanks to Economic Pravda for publicizing our discussions. Please send your questions, and these materials will be published and disseminated among the participants. Now, Robert Kinkner, Deputy Head of the German Economic Center, and that's I want not only invite you to say some welcome words, but maybe express your thoughts, because Robert, for many years, was working on issues of bringing Ukrainian economy to the EU standards. So, the floor is yours for a short introduction.
Yes, thank you very much, Gleb, and good afternoon, and also a warm welcome here from Berlin to all participants of our monthly online discussion that is today devoted to the special topic of EU accession negotiations. Is the Ukrainian economy ready, and vice versa? As I understand, this will be the last event for this year, and it is, as always, a great pleasure for me, for the German academic team, whose deputy team leader I am, to continue our very good and long-standing cooperation with the Center for Economic Strategy in supporting and co-hosting this event today together. The German economic team, as was already mentioned, is an economic policy advisory project funded by the German government and has been active for many years in Ukraine and other countries in the region of the Eastern Partnership of the EU, the Balkans, and Central Asia. As Lip already said, our colleagues from CES will start with an overview, with a traditional overview of the Ukrainian economy during November and December, and will highlight the key changes that the various sectors in the economy happened during the last months. And then I'm very much looking forward to the focus topic, EU accession, which obviously takes place against the background of the December session of the European Council that started earlier today, and which features Ukraine very prominently on its agenda in different aspects. One of them, obviously, is the potential opening of the membership negotiations. In the run-up to this summit, the news flow, I would say, has been very sobering, concerning regarding Ukraine and its near-term Euro integration perspectives, but I hope that our panel of Ukrainian EU experts will be able to shed some light on these developments. Having said that, I would like to give the word back to Gleb, the Executive Director of the CES, who will moderate the discussion. Thank you, Gleb. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. And now we come to our monthly review. And we will talk also about the prospects of Ukraine for accession to EU. later. And as usual, we start about the situation at the front line, about situation in separate sectors of economy, and about the situation in the humanitarian sphere. So, Maxim Smoluk, the floor is yours.
Дякую, Глібе. Вітаю всіх
Thank you, Glib.
глядачів і слухачів
Greetings
нашого
to all participants.
Розпочинаю показ слайдів.
I will start sharing my screen.
Отже, розпочнімо з огляду
So
воєнної
let's start
ситуації,
with
що
the
відбувалося
review of
останнім
war situation, what was
листопаді.
happening
В
in November
листопаді
on the front
українська
line.
армія здебільшого
Ukrainian
перебувала
army
в обороні.
was mostly
Росіяни
holding
наступали
defensive
здебільшого в районі Авдіївки, але
actions.
також
Russians were attacking in
в іншій лінії
Avdiivka, and
фронту,
also they were
які
trying
ці
to
події не
attack on
припиняються.
other parts of the front
Останні
line.
тижні
So
активізувалися спроби
in
росіян
recent weeks,
атакувати
we
українську
see
енергоінфраструктуру
attempts
безуспішними
of Russians to probe Ukrainian air defense, and
З
we
хороших
expect
новин
that these
тимчасовий морський коридор,
attacks will continue.
Україна
On good news, that
зафіксувала
the temporary sea
підписання
corridor,
зернової угоди
which
для того, щоб запускати
was
літаки
introduced by Ukraine
вже
to
опублікований.
unlock
Можете
the
знайомитися
Odessa
ще
ports,
детальніше.
had been
Також
operated. We will talk more about that
цікавих
later.
і
And another
страшних трохи сучасних
uh,
аспектів війни.
aspect
12
of current
грудня
warfare.
росіяни
On December
атакували
12th,
одного з найбільших
Russians attacked
українських
one of the largest telecom providers,
коли
Kyivstar, and for more than 24 hours, they deprived approximately one third of
доступ до
Kyivstar
зв'язку
customers from the
відновлюється.
access to their cell phone
Підкреслює важливість кібербезпеки та
services.
та тих
So
кіберзагроз,
again,
які стоять перед
we have to emphasize the importance of cybersecurity
Україною.
for Ukraine. Let's move to
Нещодавно
macroeconomic trends.
Держстат опублікував інформацію щодо зростання
Ukrainian
ВВП
Statistics
України в
Center
третьому кварталі
just published about the Ukraine's
Відповідно до
GDP
цих даних ВВП
for
зріс на 9,3%.
Q3 for 2023, and
Зростання
it
ВВП
increased to
сповільнилося
9 by
порівняно з
3
другим
in
кварталом,
relation
і
to the
ми,
last
на
year.
жаль,
We see
перебуваємо
that this
більш
increase
ризиковій
is
зимі, ніж ми були до повномасштабного вторгнення.
slower
І
comparing to the
наразі
previous quarter, and
як НБУ,
for
так і
according to the
приватні
forecasts
інвестиції
both of
компанії
NBU and private
стримують,
Ukrainian
що в
companies,
2024 році
both
зростання не
in
буде
2023 and 2024, the growth won't be as rapid as the last two
прогноз
quarters of
ВВП
2023.
ВВП
According
зростатиме
to
до
the
4%
IMF
цього року. Це свіжий
forecast,
прогноз видання
our
Ukrainian
Ukrainian GDP
Business.
will will grow
ВВП зросте на
from 3 to 4%.
2024
NBU's forecast is
В
3.6%.
листопаді трохи погіршилися очікування
In
бізнесу.
November, we
опитування
saw that business
регулярного
expectation
населення
decreased.
України. Індекс
This
очікувань
index of expectation is collected by the
знизився
NBU.
з
It decreased to 49.1 points comparing to
означає, що
49.6 in October. It means that mostly businesses have negative expectations, and according to the NBU, the key reasons are continued war operations, very significant security risks, deterioration of logistics chains, especially because of the blockade at the Polish of the trucks at Polish border. We have unstable electricity supply and shortage of skilled workers. This is what made expectations of Ukrainian business to decrease in November. Sectoral analysis for the winter period, we focus on the energy sector. Fortunately, the situation is still stable. We had no significant blackouts post the weather and to the attacks of Russian army. In November, we saw a rapid decrease of export of Ukrainian energy. Currently, Ukrainian energy systems records the deficit, which is um, compensated by EU. Russians tried to attack our energy infrastructures a couple of times. Luckily, these attempts were in vain. There are issues with the supply of coal, and there are forecasts that Ukraine will have not enough of coal to go through the winter period, and we will have to burn gas for electricity generation. But we expect that we will have more than enough natural gas for that, even if it's more expensive uh, fuel source. And we also have to say that Ukraine fulfilled all conditions necessary to become a full member of NCE, and we became one of the largest members of these organizations, and we will also participate in decision making in decision making of these organizations. And for Ukraine, the first step as the full-scale member will to accrue uh, uh, the to create a pool of critical spare parts for all members of NCE. And in November, we the product ferrous production slightly increased to 4.4% comparing to October. This is due to work of the temporary sea corridor, which also incorporates metal products, including agriculture products. So Ukraine has option to export its ferrous products by sea. This is an important factor to restore manufacturing, but companies uh, uh, say businesses say that we need more protected sea routes from the point of view of including that will include the mine security and convoying these trade ships. In November, we saw increase in export of grains and oil due to the increase in sea export. Ukraine exported 4.5 million tons of grain and oil products, and we expect that in next months this amount will increase, and we will see 5 and more million tons of export, which will show like stable effort of that will be favorable for majority of agricultural companies. We saw we had a very good harvest this year, but good harvest they require reliable ways of exporting agriculture products to the global markets and extension of the existing land routes also. Let's move to monetary sector. In November, we saw decrease in international reserve of the NBU because the National Bank continued to intervene on the foreign currency market to remove fluctuations of the exchange rate. We already 2 months in the mode of regulated exchange rate, and Ukraine hryvnia even strengthened at first, and now it's starting the rate is starting to decrease, and the decrease of the rate is due to the decrease of international support amounts, and uh, thanks to interventions of NBU, we saw that they currently we see that official exchange rate NBU is 37 hryvnia, which is historic low, but we don't see reasons for any bigger decreases. And starting from tomorrow, the National Bank of Ukraine will lower key rate down to 15% from 16%. National Bank says that this decision is related to uh, uh, slower inflation, which now is decreasing to 5.1% year to year. And also NBU says that this key rate is decreased because hryvnia assets are continue to be interesting for banks and for deposits of citizens. We saw That's why we see that the governmental bonds rates are now decreasing too. As we mentioned, inflation slows down to 5.1% year to year in November. And starting from the beginning of the year, the inflation rate is 4.4. We saw increase in products for foods and for transport costs. And due to the slowdown of inflation was due to good harvest and increased supply of food products. That's why we see such a low inflation in the last couple of months. We see an increase both for hryvnia and for deposits and for hryvnia loans in October. That's the latest data that we have available. We saw increase in amount of deposits of the households, both on termed and hryvnia and foreign currency. We saw decrease of hryvnia deposits on demand, and we saw increase in issued loans, both for households and for businesses, thanks to the 579 program, which is and loans according to this program. In line with this program, they constitute more than 40% of all hryvnia credits. We have
And that's it from my side. Thank you so much, Maxim. Yuri Haida, it's over to you. Chief Economist, it's over to you. As for fiscal sector, you're welcome to speak up. Thank you so much, Maxim. Thank you, Gleb. In fact, let's start with the foreign financing. In November, Ukraine received the assistance loan, or rather its loan, amounted to $1.6 billion from European Union and $400 million from the World Bank under the UK guarantee. Ukraine did not receive grant funding from the US. Probably you know the situation in the US, in Congress. And accordingly, in 11 months of this year, the state budget deficit and debt repayment needs now amount to a bit more than $51 billion. But the foreign financing disbursed so far, $37 billion US. And we can see the great session of months when we had no monetary financing, so the remission was the case. And we can see that 4 months in a row, the foreign financing do not reach the level of the budget deficit. So by means of involving the debt financing through the bonds, probably by means of partly decreasing the residues of the reserves, not that treasury one, but the reserves some were left. So in November, by the data of the Ministry of Ministry of Finances, we had the domestic VAT revenues maintained at 22.9 billion refund steady, and but for the situation in western borders, blockages, blocking the trucks, blocking the checkpoints, and that is why we have that reduction at 20%, which is not a characteristic as for now, decline of import, that duties and excise due to blockages, and definitely the taxations for international trade. And here we can see that domestic VAT revenues maintain 23 billion hryvnia and 10 billion hryvnia per month, we can see. But at the same time, this November, the VAT has increased, and it could help us compensate that recession of indirect incomes. So CPT compensated for loss of indirect tax revenues. As for spendings, defense spending down to the lowest since January, and we can see the monthly defense spending declined, the lowest monthly spending since January, and now we can see that it's now declined to 121 billion hryvnia, and the major driver is the decrease of procurement of weapons and ammunition by 92 billion hryvnia in comparison to September. We can see that difference in numbers. Most of other expenses, we have them on the same level, but 5 billion hryvnia increase we have, and this is the economic activity expenses which have increased, and this is for the protection of critical infrastructure and energy critical infrastructure facilities. And we had 6 billion hryvnia allocated under utilities function and construction of water pipe system. If we consider the local budgets, we have the unexpected situation, at least to me, in October. We had we can see that October local budget expenses slightly decreased, not significantly, up to 60 billion hryvnia. Probably 62 would be the that average. And in comparison to the growth in monthly revenues, it contributed to increase of accumulated surplus of local budgets and reached almost 100 billion hryvnia since the beginning of this year. And that's it as for the fiscal sector. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Yura. Now it's over to the colleague. Thank you for this overview. And it's over to Yana Ohrimenko, the chief economist of CES. Thank you, Gleb. Just give me a second. All right. In November, European Commission issued a report, and there were the recommendations as for launching the accession negotiations with Ukraine. And Ukrainian economy was at a glance. There were more than 30 chapters in divided in 6 clusters. So we were trying to see the general picture, evaluating the criteria and the clusters, so we can see that most of the space for improvement is about fundamental criteria, which encompasses democratic institutions, the rule of law, the market economy, the ability to deal with competitiveness in the union, state procurements, financial control, etc. This class was evaluated from the early stage, varying from the early stage lowest one and some level of preparation. The resources, agriculture, and cohesion was scored a little bit better, as the same for other clusters. As for now, the greatest progress was reached in external relations cluster. It's a well advanced level, good level of preparation. Many of the factors have impacted this. The development, in particular, development in the area of international defense, etc. Speaking about one of the fundamental clusters, the functioning market economy and existence of functioning market economy, the European Committee remarks, highlights that despite the war and there is some level of preparation, and supporting such stability has caused the role of the state, has increased the role of the state, and we can see that regarding economic governance, continue to implement prudent policies, maintains macroeconomic stability. Besides, there were some structural issues, and even before the full-scale invasion, we can see quite a great volume of in the non-formal sector, quite low level of domestic and external investments, and the lack of the access to finances as for the enterprises. As for the rest of the criteria, Ukraine was scored as for their early stage and some preparedness, and at the same time there are clear recommendations from the European Commission to Ukraine, so-called home task. It encompasses the following regarding the macroeconomic. We have the recommendation, as it was mentioned, to continue to implement prudent policies, maintain a macroeconomic stability, and also we have the home task to ensure adequate financing for core state functions, at the same time improving public transparency, speaking about public finances. Besides, as for monetary policy, the European Commission recommends to safeguard financial sector stability, so-called non-performing loans, or just like the loans with the high risk, we can say it in other words. As for private sector, improve business environment, in particular by reducing the bureaucratic burden and to address the problem of corruption, and by enhancing the anti-monopoly framework. It is recommended to foster effective management of state-owned enterprises and to intensify privatization. The last recommendation deals with labor market, and the European Commission recommends to take measures to reintegrate internal displaced people and other persons affected by war, and to, in fact, help them adapt to the labor market. And the capacity to cope with competitive pressure in EU. This is one more additional, very fundamental criteria, speaking about the economic environment. According to the EU report, Even before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine did not demonstrate great progress. It demonstrated little progress. And in fact, the high level of international assistance we can observe today can be utilized for modernization of the key infrastructure. It is recommended to exploit this opportunity, to use this opportunity. We can observe that in Ukraine, the level of openness to international trade is low in comparison to the EU country members and other newly accessed member state. And if we speak about international trade, GDP, you can see it on the screen. If we speak about the research and the development, this also impacts the situation. We can see great gap in the level of the income profit. If we compare Ukrainian representatives and representatives of EU, as for now, Ukraine is on the early stage, and the European Commission recommends the following. It is recommended to keep renewal and rehabilitation of key infrastructure, in particular transport and energy infrastructure, educational and healthcare facilities and institutions. It is recommended to facilitate private investment by improving public procurement mechanism and by developing administrative capacities required for the management of investment projects. And as for the human capital, it is recommended to review and improve the education and training policy and the professional education, and to renew the educational system, update it, upgrade, and to provide and to meet also to meet the demands of the labor market. So it is supposed to be done by the educational system for us to meet the requirements of the post-war times. And we have discussed 2 of 32 chapters. As for the next year, Ukraine must become closer to adopting the European legislation. Many of them deal with the legislative initiatives. It is difficult here to identify the indicators, but as for the indicators we can mention here, Ukraine should increase almost by 4 times the renewable energy resources and energy produced with this renewable energy system. Also, the recommendation is to include adoption of the strategy as for social policy and the labor market, and the number of changes required can take too much time for us to use only one slide for this. As for economic and monetary policy, it's one of the chapters we have mentioned before. So as it was mentioned before, as for those 27 chapters, Ukraine has not received the evaluation or assessment about the level of preparation, but here we do not speak about the economic and monetary policy. The European Commission mentions that the macroeconomic policies on the high level would make it possible to stick to the high level of stability in the war times. But despite this, it is required to implement a series of changes dealing with the preparation to return to inflation targeting and absence of control over the rate of hryvnia. The National Bank of Ukraine has launched that check, as my colleague has mentioned, in early October. The course of the mode was changed, and also as far as it would be possible to limit monetary financing of the state budget and prepare to medium-term budgetary planning in 2024. As for monetary policy, the European Commission mentions that generally the National Bank of Ukraine has institutional capacity to implement the independent monetary policy. And in particular, it's possible owing to the recent changes, amendments to the legislation, but everything what is necessary, it is to deal with the criteria as for some of the bodies and committees. Speaking about the fiscal policy of the full-scale invasion has affected this. In particular, the war has significantly hampered the situation and also affects the transparency of the information and it harms the possibility to make any anticipations. The Ukrainian reporting system should meet the demands of the European Union standards. Ukraine has succeeded to approach the medium-term budget planning. What we can see it from as an example, we can take the budget for 2024. Thank you so much. That's it from my side. Thank you so much, Yana. Thank you for your presentation. Your presentation made it clear that we have a huge burden of work, a huge amount of work to do, and we should start with the challenges as well. Taras Kachka is the deputy head of Ministry of Economy, the key person in negotiations for Ukrainian economy to be able to receive a positive effect as if we speak about this neutral market. But as quite often it is mentioned that Ukrainian quick accession to EU and accession to the market, it would be a huge challenge to Ukrainian market that we cannot cope with this competitiveness. What do you think? What would you like to mention as a person who is in the government? You are one of the greatest experts as if we speak about discussing the issues concerning the negotiations with the EU, and what about our European perspectives and how do they impact our situation? Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for such kind words. In fact, probably I would, we don't want to be great experts.
Sometimes you should be skeptical if you're introduced as the major expert. So what we should, with regards to the competitiveness of Ukrainian economy, this this skepsis is bilateral because we see that this year Ukraine disrupted two major markets of our neighbors, the agriculture market and trucking market, which also says that a very fast change of economic conditions and trade flows brings big psychological reactions. And we have to say that besides figures, economic indicators, we should take into account the psychological factor, which is sometimes a very important factor for success in economy. We have to understand that Ukraine it's a significant economy to be accepted to EU, and we understand that starting from 2004, almost like 20 years will pass since Poland and Hungary joined EU, and like 20 years ago, that was a very large-scale extension of EU, and I think that the scale of Ukrainian economy it's comparable, and that what creates certain negative and skeptical approach of certain EU members on EU accession. And besides governmental and bureaucratical processes, we also have challenges in integration of Ukraine economy into EU economy, both on economical convergence indexes and at the level of cooperation of businesses. And here I want to say that even nonetheless of the fear of certain shocks, I think that to a certain extent we've passed through this shock due to the war because Ukrainian business now is much more eager to look for partners in EU and is looking for integration with EU, and this will speed up the actual economical integration of Ukraine to EU. And among the challenges, we have to we have like when we did our self-assessment this year, and in uh, maybe very often certain regulations we didn't implement because they are uh, related to internal mechanism, EU mechanisms. And they will work only within the EU context. And if we look critically, that assessment that is given in the EU report, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are assessments that are not that much related to the real situation because these are assessments of EU commissions on how good they understand what's happening in Ukraine. So when they have like number one, so like initial progress, it means that we uh, with European Commission haven't talked in details about how things work on that matters in Ukraine. And in this report, I saw certain assessment that scared me a little bit because DG Klima says Ukraine has no progress in climate policy. However, we clearly understand that we have our individual context, our individual ecology policy that should be taken into account by the DG Klima. And in Europe, there are still discussions going on the climate policies. And the challenge of Ukraine is in ensuring not only compliance with the requirements, so like, and but to implement our regulation and how we urge our business into the EU economy mechanics. Sometimes these are administrative measures, some exclusions. This is what I want to mention separately. Besides the rules, there is a huge problem that haven't shown up yet in all areas that are important for Ukraine, agriculture, heavy industries. EU is heavily subsidizing those sectors. So like, and these things that can be subsidized and to what extent can be subsidized, we haven't realized that. For example, if we look at the metal industry, every metal industry factory in the EU received like multi-million subsidies for green transition. This is very honorable goal, but this creates discrepancies in competitions. That's why we have to build up a very strict business strategies, not only about asking more subsidies, but we should understand clearly how our competitive economy sectors, like agriculture, metal industries, and energy sector, how they will function uh, within the internal EU market. And this, we just started um, looking at that. And that will be our task number one. Ukrainian case, like like any other case of extension, EU extension, will be unique. Ukraine is not the country of early stage of transformation, how it started with Poland or Hungary. Our processes are either finalized or like maybe they implemented in a not proper way, so like privatization of land. Yeah. Just to summarize, in any way, we are ready because we are de facto in the process of integration because we have uh, tax-free trade agreement. This year we moved a lot forward in tax uh, 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 the tax association and so like and but the challenges both for businesses and for the governments they are still quite high on harmonizing this integration and that so like we should integrate into EU as fast as possible, but the speed should not compromise all these nuances that exist as of today. Thank you, Taras. I have a question to you. Maybe you all because you also politicians and your time is valuable. But a very profane question: if we now received free access to all markets permanently, like tomorrow, and I will not uh, say that the war and if the war was open because it's very unrealistic, would it mean a certain increase of economic capabilities of Ukraine, or uh, or maybe like if the war ends, we will have big influx of investments. Like uh, you're on mute, Taras. I was trying to talk to myself. We here, the main task is to understand what we define as a success. So we have to critically assess the political processes that happened in Poland because Poland, when they're assessing their economical success of the integration to EU, uh, it included a quite significant amount of political debates, like, for example, the Donald Tusk government, who is a right-wing liberal, and they say that integration with EU, that economically active part of the country will achieve more success, and like there are right conservative politics who say that we are leaving behind the smaller businesses who are less economically active. So, like, if so, if you ask whether proactive exporters will use this opportunity of integration to you, yes, they will use this opportunity. Maybe even those who were not um, uh, targeting EU markets. The biggest example for the last 2 years is the Ukrainian machine building, agriculture machines. This was a local market, and they saw that they're compatible in CIS market, and now these manufacturing companies start talking to the engineers of the EU. They For them, it's easy to find orders from EU to start integrating with and same is happening in defense industry. The boom that we have in our defense industry says that the war clearly showed that Ukrainian industry, defense industry, who was speaking on the engineering language of the former Soviet Union, yes, like traditions from back there, they quite easily find common language with EU engineers. So like this flip in orientation is happening, and this happens thanks to our like uh, final stages of transformation. So like, but this is like more liberal model that we are talking about. But what will happen to small communities? What will happen to non-efficient part of the economy? It's an open question. This is like first part of the assessment. But like usually the biggest challenge will be not for business. The biggest challenge will be to integrate those businesses whose markets depend on the state regulations. So, like when we talk about acknowledgement of licenses, regulatory environment cooperation, because our institutions will have to be redrafted significantly. For example, the system of pollution trading. So, uh, so like so that can be a matter of accusations of the conflict interest, if not of corruptions, because these there we will talk about um, uh, bigger companies. So um, defining success on those issues, the this will take some time, and like like usually our government is the first to be criticized if something bad happens. Yeah, and I expect there will be another level of criticism when we will be approaching, will be joining EU. For example, pharmaceutical industry, we have two large companies, like two majors. Yes, let's say two majors who usually were taking niche of uh, cheap drugs. Now they have potential technologies, corporate structures that is uh, 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 on par with EU companies, but without like proper regulatory part. It's such integration to EU is not possible. Thank you, Taras, for quite interesting examples that make the process of integrations more understandable. Now I pass the floor to the representative of the EU, uh, Alberto Finanzidies. He is the head of the trade representations of EU in Ukraine. Alberto.
Yes.
Yeah. In your
Hello.
opinion, yeah, hello. Thank you for joining. In your opinion, what are the most positive or like risky potential results of economic integration of Ukraine, fast economic integration of Ukraine to the European Union, to the single market? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Felipe. First of all, we have just received a warning in the delegation that we have to go to the shelter because apparently there were Kinjals launched from the east. But if I have to disconnect immediately because they come to get me, excuse me in advance for that. This is the reality in which we are in, as you know, in Kiev. So it's complicated.
Alberto, Vanyok, Nikolaevsky Vanyok, the famous guy, or like, I don't know, he is saying that it is just imitation of Kinjal missile. So I believe that in a few minutes you will get additional announcements that you should not go to
I trust.
So I believe you could continue and answer my question, but like if you have.
I continue. No. I will continue in the office. It's okay. It's no problem. I won't go down until I hear an explosion. So I wanted to. Well, first, I think it's very interesting what Taras mentioned before, in the context of the complexity of approximating Ukraine to the EU internal market. Many things have been said until now. Jana made a very good presentation about the context of the enlargement package and how the 6 clusters. One thing is clear: it looks like if Ukraine wants to jump into a train that is already at full speed, and sorry for this. Jump into a train at full speed, and the issue with internal market is highly regulated. It's an ecosystem that has a lot of implications. It's very idiosyncratic, and it's very difficult, I understand, for Ukraine to approximate the legislation on specific sectors, because if you start to look, and we are seeing that already, when you look at one specific area, there is always another bylaw, another regulation, another directive that also applies to that area, and also the institutional framework. Replicating that ahead of accession outside, in the case of Ukraine, is highly complicated and is very difficult. And then there is the other point that Ukraine has this political aim to join the European Union, and we are supporting Ukraine in this process. And that means that we're preparing already the process of assessing the progress in Ukraine in these 6 clusters. But it's also true that our regulatory framework is continuously changing. So we need to continue dialogue and increase dialogue with Ukraine to be sure that there is full understanding and alignment of what we are doing. And Taras mentioned some of the areas in which there is a lot of developments on the EU side, on agriculture, climate, but also on any other regulatory area. The EU is dynamic, so it's continuously evolving. So this dynamic nature has to be acknowledged. And indeed, it will be difficult to integrate, but there are possibilities ahead of accession. And we're looking into that, and we need to be ambitious and try to live up to the aim of the association agreement, which is to gradually integrate Ukraine into the EU internal market. The accession process is going to be long, probably, and what's going to happen today and tomorrow in Brussels is speculation. So I cannot say now what's going to happen tomorrow. It depends. The ball is on the member states. They have to decide this by unanimity. But what we can already start doing is continuing helping Ukraine in the approximation on those areas where it is easier to approximate, and also in the context of the association agreement, because there we can reap concrete effects, concrete benefits for Ukraine deriving from the approximation process. One example is market access in, for instance, regulated goods or goods that require certification. And usually those are goods that can be easily, there is demand for exports. And there are already some examples in Ukraine of certain inputs that are produced, for instance, in the west of the country, in Lviv, that are then further exported to the EU internal market for further processing. And we have some tools at our disposal, some technical possibilities to facilitate this process. One of them is, for instance, this mutual recognition agreement on technical standards with Ukraine. If we reach this level of alignment and mutual recognition that the entities and the quality infrastructure that prevails in Ukraine is equivalent to that of the European Union, it's a model based on trust. And on that basis, we can incentivize investments in Ukraine and contribute to enhancing the attractiveness of the country as a destination for foreign capital that could eventually, of course, have trickle effects on the economy and contribute to increasing the economic prospects of the country. And this is what happened, for instance, in the member states that joined the European Union in 2004, Poland, Slovakia, etc. The many European companies that were, for instance, producing in, let's say, Spain, they moved to Poland. It does not mean that, of course, there's a readjustment that is done, but it's just based on the market. The market dictates that it is more productive, it's more competitive to produce in a certain place because there are certain characteristics that make the investment more profitable and more attractive. And we should acknowledge that also on the EU side. That's why, from our side, we see some resistance to the inflow of Ukrainian goods. We have this issue with the truck drivers. This is about services. We have the problems with the agricultural sector. But all of these areas have to be assessed also in the context of the EU, how we're going to deal with a bigger European Union. This is not a secret. President von der Leyen mentioned in the State of the Union speech last September that we need to launch policy discussions internally within the European Union to assess the impact of the accession and how we can modify the key policies. And some of them are, of course, based on subsidies, like the Common Agricultural Policy, cohesion policy, structural funds, how this is going to be distributed, and what is the impact of absorbing such a large new member state as Ukraine into the European Union. So we also need to do our homework from our side. So on the aspect of Ukraine's approximation in the context of the accession process, there is a template that we are using to assess the progress. This was agreed in the Copenhagen summit, the so-called Copenhagen criteria. And the dialogue is going to be now enhanced in that context. We also have the association agreement that is a sort of, the DCFTA is a sort of antechamber of enlargement. And we are working towards effective access so that we don't remain in a static position, just discussing policy developments without any concrete benefits for the Ukrainian businesses. We can already activate several clauses and achieve a greater level of integration. Last month, Ukraine and the EU adopted the alternative rules of origin under the PEM Convention, and this will allow that Ukraine can benefit from the network and the matrix of FTAs that exist in this area, Euro-Mediterranean area, without tariffs. So this all contributes to more benefits. And maybe the last point is about how to encourage reforms, because this is a political process, but we need carrots. And of course, we have to take into account the economic situation of Ukraine. And one of the biggest challenges now is we have seen the budget for 2024 that was proposed, and the fiscal deficit is quite significant. And this is something that the focus of the IMF second review that was approved on Monday by the board lays on that aspect, on fiscal consolidation and fiscal measures. We, as a key donor, as a key partner of Ukraine, are committed to continuing providing assistance. That's the purpose and the essence of the facility that has been proposed. Again, on that, we cannot anticipate what's going to be decided in the context of the multi-annual financial framework in the Council tomorrow. But the essence and the objective is clear. The structure of the facility represents the biggest challenge that Ukraine is facing. The biggest one is budget support, immediate. The state needs to continue functioning. There is a deficit that needs to be bridged, and together with other partners, notably the G7, we are in discussions to make sure that we continue providing this support. On the context of help to investment, the Pillar 2 provides this de-risking mechanisms and guarantees that incentivize investments into Ukraine. This is the classic role of the public sector. We see that there is an inefficiency in the market. Some players are not going to invest, or there is some business that is not going to take place because of the current context. So the public sector should kick in, and we are, let's say, structuring our help in that sense to mitigate those negative aspects of that discourage companies from.
Please leave to the shelter.
Sorry, you have heard that. So, this is the message I get. And then on the final point I wanted to mention is that all this assistance that we provide to Ukraine is conditional on reforms by Ukraine, and we see this as a carrot. We incentivize Ukraine to continue carrying out performance reforms. You saw that the macro-financial assistance package we had for 2023, the 18 billion, was based notably on a set of 20 conditions, many of them in the area of rule of law. Ukraine has delivered to a great extent what was agreed in the memorandum of understanding, and in the context of the facility, the plan will be the guiding document to guide this reform process. And finally, maybe one word, because I saw your report, your very good report from the Center for Economic Strategy about the constructive capital in Ukraine. I think it's a very interesting document, so congratulations on that. I see that you identify the cornerstones of constructive capital, and there are 6 areas, and I think this is pretty much aligned with what we are assessing in the enlargement package, in the enlargement context. The recommendations that the European Commission has made are pretty much are reflected in your document, and I think that we have all the ingredients to cook a nice cake, and that's something on which we will need to increase exchanges with the Ukrainian authorities with this clear goal in mind, using smartly our assistance as a way of leveraging reforms. And then the final point is perhaps on the use of Russian assets, because I think it's something that is of interest for you. You know that there has been a proposal to use the Russian immobilized assets in the European Union. This is not public yet. It's been discussed as well in the Council. There will be a lot of news over the weekend, but it's also something that would contribute to fuel, once agreed, give more funding to Ukraine in the context of the reconstruction. So it's an opportunity to rebuild the country according to European standards. This Build Back Better concept is based on that. And I think that the continuous monitoring by think tanks is important, because that gives a broader perspective that sometimes when you are working on a daily basis dealing with these files, we might lose track of the bigger picture. So this presentation today has been extremely helpful, and I hope that we can continue having such discussions in the coming year. So thanks, and I hope I can stay a bit before going to the shelter. Have a nice day.
Public Telegram channels are not announcing like any launches, so I have one small question to you. Currently, we have this temporary access to the market in times of war. I mean, like free access without quotas and tariffs. Is there any official or like semi-official opinion of the Commission, or your personal opinion? Do you believe that this regime could be prolonged, or that it could be extended till Ukraine becomes member? Do you believe it is necessary? That it is a good idea? Is it discussed at all? Because it could really be helpful to investment, including those investments that are to be supported by the Pillar 2 in the facility.
So it's a very pertinent question, Felipe. And well, I'm a Eurocrat, so I don't give my personal opinion in a public webinar, unfortunately. But that's the way it is. So I can give you the opinion of the EU in the sense that the Commission is supporting Ukraine, so we're committed. The decision we made to liberalize all trade was made deliberately. It was a step that was taken to help Ukraine. We have faced issues this year and last year, because of the increased imports into certain member states. So the current situation is that the measures that were extended until June this year, until June next year will expire then, and we need to think already now what to do next. And we are working on a solution. Our goal is to keep helping the Ukrainian economy, not only in terms of financial assistance, but also in terms of market access. And that means that we need to strike a balance between what give the maximum we can give to Ukraine, while taking duly into account the concerns of member states as well, because at the end, the EU is a combination of 27 member states, and we need to consider that. So I think that there will be an outcome that is satisfactory for all. I've seen that Ukraine has taken steps to help find solutions like this export licensing system and other measures, and I think this constructive spirit has been highly welcomed by the Commission, and we need to find win-win. This is not a battle where one wins and the other loses. This is not it's not that we have to one side has to make profit at the expense of the other. We need to find ways where there is mutual benefit in trading further in a way that does not drastically distort the other side, while gradually integrating. So going to the facility and the plan particularly, there are priority sectors. And one of the things that we need to think about is how to diversify the export mix of Ukraine, which is highly dominated by commodities such as grain and until especially before the war, steel. I think grain and steel was half of the agriculture, and iron and steel was half of the exports to the European Union. There is potential in Ukraine in the context of reconstruction, and this will be reflected in the plan to enhance processing capacity, for instance, for agricultural products, become more innovative, and also develop SMEs that are highly niche and can a bit on the model of the Mittelstand in Germany, so that they can produce components that can be further processed to be further integrated in value chains. The proximity to the EU is a huge advantage, the regulatory approximation as well. And Ukraine is a very competitive country that can benefit enormously from all these conditions, all this environment. And with the perspective of accession a few years ahead, that gives an incentive to invest in this direction. So the plan and the facility, Pillar 2 especially, will take this into account, how which investments are the most conducive towards economic growth and diversification of the export mix of Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers. They are very specific and very helpful. Зараз повернемося до
And now let's go back to the representatives of Ukrainian government. Ivan Hornyak, the deputy head of the governmental office of cooperation of European Euro-Atlantic cooperation and integration. Ivan, with Taras and Alberto, we discussed some trade issues, and you are the expert, and it's your position, it's your job, it's your part of job in the integration process. And from the point of view of the processes, what major opportunities and challenges can you see as for Ukrainian economy, business, for us to get profit, maximum profit? As far as I remember, probably it's Ron and Nazar Bobitsky is going to comment on this as well. He also was involved into this process. At this time, he was the head of the trade mission, the head of, if I'm not mistaken, the trade department of the representational office of Ukraine in the EU. And when there was the negotiation process on the association, accession negotiations were on, the business was not included, and there were many unexpected issues appearing. And also we faced the issues to use the maximum of the capacity and potential of EU market. What is your vision? What are the peculiarities of this procedure? What can be improved? What is the focus of the governmental office to facilitate the usage of economic potential of European integration? Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. I'm delighted to hear Alberto's words about the opportunities of the economic integration that it should happen. And it's really difficult to add something after the speeches of Mr. Taras Kachka, who has very much of the knowledge about Ukrainian and EU relations. And I would like to add something concerning what we should expect in a couple of months, probably next year, from the point of view of our integration, of what we're going to do. First of all, much is now crucial for us, which is decisive. Negotiations, first of all, about opening the negotiation of Ukrainian accession, this political decision, which is extremely important to us, politically important to us, to our society, and it's important for general European integration. And the second part, the decision of the approval of the Ukrainian facility. Alberto has mentioned this as well, these two elements. This is something that is going to happen today, tomorrow, during the EU Council meetings, EU meetings, and it's something here we speak about our integration in the nearest months, years. From the other point of view, there is a process, and there are some other processes that have not been seized, have not paused, even despite the full-scale invasion. First of all, it's our decision to join EU and to to deepen the cooperation with the EU market. And first of all, it is because the reasons are the following. The EU expressed solidarity and then facilitated the cooperation with the Ukraine. And now this decision is in force, and it is going to be in force until June 2024. And now we are actively communicating with the EU part, EU side for us in 2024 to accelerate this process, this accession process. I believe that a bit later, the European Parliament will have much other businesses, many of other businesses, not, but we should do it before this harsh area rush time. And we should agree with our colleagues that the EU market is regulated phenomenon. Your EU market is well regulated, and in our policy right now, we are attempting to, it is during this period of time, we are attempting to provide incentives to liberalize our market. And it's going to be one of the greatest challenges in our European integration and our approaching the recommendations we have received from EU within that package your colleague has mentioned. And it's really a great ideological thing that we should deal with. We and you, representatives of the society, we are to find the solutions to those issues. It's about how we are going to combine fulfilling our responsibilities within the framework of our integration to EU, which require more regulations, greater control over the market, and at the same time, greater demand from the society, especially medium and small-scale businesses, to calls to liberalization, to greater freedoms. We have such a call from our society. And to my mind, the solution is the following. This regulated situation in EU, it permitted to create more clear rules of the game, and this way to stimulate, give incentives to economic players for them to play openly on the market. And it's a philosophical question, but when we can discuss them for a long time, it's a clear challenge, obvious challenge we can see, and this is the challenge to our civil society as well. And secondly, I would like to comment on Paget report that was published. It's an important document. It's going to be a tiny roadmap to us in our actions and activities, because we understand that without progress, when fulfilling those recommendations, the EU Commission mentions in those chapters, areas, in the corresponding chapters of the upcoming accession negotiations. It would be difficult if we'd not address all the problems mentioned in those chapters. So we should fulfill all the recommendations mentioned there. So those recommendations, on the other hand, mentioned in the report, they are based on the input of Ukrainian side and the analysis of the condition of Ukrainian economy and what was going on. As for June 2023, this is the regular practice, nothing new. Year EU committee, it takes 3, 4, 5 months from the European Commission to write that report. So what we're going to have in October, November 2024, it's going to also encompass that progress we gained by June 2024. So having this spare space and time, so we should fulfill those reform recommendations, implement them during the first first 6 months of 2024. And the Vice Prime Minister, Deputy Ministers also have spoke about this. And this is what we are going to do as the first part of 2024, despite what results of the EU Council are going to be. And at the same time, all the reforms and the future reforms, upcoming reforms, implementation, I should say, the system building directives would require great investments from the state, establishing new authorities, regulators. And here we speak about huge costs and expenses. You can understand our economic condition, what is going on. And thank you so much for the analysis you are providing regularly. Thank you for sending them, sharing this great information. And I would like to mention that from this point of view, approval of Ukrainian facility is extremely important to us because owing to this, we're going to have resources to hold those reforms, to implement those reforms. So we need tools, we need financial assistance, we receive grant assistance to implement those reforms mentioned, in particular in the enlargement package report. And that's the second moment. And the third one is that what is very important, access to the market at the beginning, since the beginning of your event. You mentioned this, you shown, demonstrated the first slide, you demonstrated what was happening to us right now. And let's be honest that we don't have another alternatives rather than EU right now. And our European colleagues mentioned this as well. We can speak about Black Sea initiatives, and we hope on this. It's important to us, but we should look for the solution with our European colleagues, some systematic solution to the problems that we are facing right now, that we have been facing for the latest months. And we should also solve those issues with our neighboring countries. And during the next few months, we're going to find the solutions. And we hope that that strategic discussion mentioned by Mr. Alberto about the future reforming of the EU, about the vision or the role of the member states during the meetings of the EU Commission in integrational policies, etc. For this discussion us to lead that the EU Commission to have the leverages upon those states that violate the principles of function of EU. Now this is the key that we require. Without this, we will enter the EU where one state can blackmail the whole process of EU integration. That's why, thank you, European Commission representatives. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. I can see the initiative from the side of France, Germany, and thank you so much that you're addressing those problems systematically. Thank you so much. Have any questions? I will be glad to answer. And very important last thing, it wasn't raised.
Thank you, Ivan. Another important point that was raised in chat also by our colleagues from our legal community. And we have two more of our colleagues, my colleagues, because they are representatives of the NGOs, Veronika Movchan and Nazar Bobetsky. I think Veronika is the best researcher of trade policies in Ukraine issue. So like, she works in different research center, and I'm very glad that we complement each other in our strong expertise. So, Veronika, on one side, it's not very good when NGOs are the last to speak, but on the other hand, you can react to the official positions of the stakeholders. I will ask you an open questions about what are your thoughts about the topic we discussed now. Thank you very much for such a kind introduction. And we are colleagues, we support each other, and we indeed, that's how we work with the government, because people who work in government, they are high-level experts, and things that were said almost completely cover the current issues we have with our relations with the EU, about the potential of joining EU and whether Ukraine is ready to join EU. Because with regards to the current summit, things that Ivan said, like his last thought, that EU should remain a strong player, and because for us it's important to join successful organizations, and we have to understand what will be the mechanism of of prosecuting certain violations of mechanisms and principles. Yes, because when everyone adhere to the rules and regulations, it's good. But what currently EU doesn't have tools to quickly react to the violations of those rules and regulations, and we and even like financial tools don't always work, because in the world a lot of things can be measured with money, but not everything. So we will see, and we will track the results of the summit. A lot of discussions will continue, but we should understand that we will stay in this process of finding consensus, because all because when now we are worried about certain formal start of the negotiations, and then we will start about the negotiation framework, about opening clusters, closing chapters. So this is the process that is consensus based, and for EU it's becoming more and more difficult to achieve this consensus. And however, while we are in this process, we keep integrating, and I agree that and I agree with Taras that Ukrainian economy is quite actively integrated into EU, but this is from our point of view. When we look at the sizes of the economies, we are a significant economy by nominal figures, but it's only nominally, and like we are large by territory. Yeah. If we look at the territories that Ukraine controls, if we even deduct occupied territories, we are still a large country by populations, but not the largest. So, and this means a lot. This is the reason for all those fears of the EU. For how long EU will have to support us? How much we will be prepared to withstand competitions? Now we see the protests at the borders that the when EU wants to close us from us. So so it means that here we should look about long-term prospects, about like things like human capital, about the condition of our innovations, and how much we invest into technological development, skills of learning skills, how much we invest in infrastructure. So what how much we are ready to invest into the potential GDP not about our current issues. Yes, and that's where we have problems. So last week we discussed the results of peace and about the skills of problem solving about among Ukrainian pupils, like problems that are not standard problem solving, and so it's also like will influence the level of our development. So like there are thoughts that when Ukraine will solve issues with the supremacy of law, we will see that a lot of intellectual property that is created by Ukrainians but registered in EU or US will come back to Ukraine. But this is things to be legal issues that has to be solved. So we need to understand that our preparedness is have long-term goals we should put in front of us right now. And another issue is overregulation in EU. Yes, EU is losing the competition to US and China. We see it by macroeconomic figures. On the other hand, I think that it happens because EU puts into the center a human, the needs of a human, and puts into the center the security of the human. I don't know if it's a mistake or not, but it's so like assuming that a human can do mistakes, we like the regulatory organs, they are taking over risks and to protect a human. This is a philosophical problem, yes, but what we want to say, and as Alberto mentioned, because EU keeps moving and like we are jumping onto the moving train, and Poland did that. Maybe at that time the EU had less carriages. So we want not only to run behind the train, but to also for us to overtake a little bit. Like maybe we have no right to vote, but we can participate in the discussions of the EU on the future regulations. So the voices of businesses, of NGOs, of the government will be heard there. Yeah, whether our comments will be accepted or not, yes, that's other issues. But nevertheless, we have this right to express our concerns. Yeah, so to listen to our other ideas or our precautions. So as soon as we get involved in those discussions, and we will understand that agenda, and we will now become part of the people who are forming it, and this will make us to catch up with the train and to ride the train much easier. And this is my thought that I want to present to the audience. Thank you, Veronica, for such framework and interesting speech. Nazar, he's an expert on EU trade policy. If you have anything to add, please, you're welcome. But like, another reason why we invited you, you have very practical understanding of how businesses integrate into the EU. What, based on the practical experience of businesses, what you can add to our discussion? Thank you very much, Gleb. Thank you, colleagues. On my side, I want to thank you for inviting me to the events of CS, and it's a great pleasure to follow your agenda. And um, there is very little I can add to all that right things that were said by the colleagues from the government, by Alberto, by the experts. The only thing that I want to mention is that it's to mention something that like where I've because I I can talk from the point of view of my diplomatic career. When I worked in the EU, I was working in the matter of Ukrainian Polish contacts, and now I am representing Ukrainian agriculture sector in Brussels. So what I want to add for us, so we should be very reserved, and we do practical conclusions on the current reaction of European businesses and on the de facto shock entrance of Ukrainian economy into EU markets. I'm talking about the grain embargo from Poland and other four neighbors. Of course, de facto, it was and supported by the Polish government blockade of Ukrainian truckers. So we can say that one of the criteria of membership Ukraine in EU is to be able to withstand the competition pressure. So, but here we see that European business competitors cannot withstand this competitive pressure according to the established rules. And this is where EU institutions should be guardians of the treaties and to be arbiters on ensuring equal opportunities for the businesses. But EU exists for tens of years, and formally there are answers to these issues. But and like and at the top of this system is the European Court, and on the other hand, we need more political will and to have critical mass of EU members to be capable to ensure this balance. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that, and this is a matter of concern for Ukraine. So, like, to what market we are aimed at? That's what Ukrainian businesses will start to asking themselves. Is it worse? Like maybe all the efforts of joining EU internal market. And here, based on my experience, we can have a hint on our further actions. European institutions with which we will be more and more integrated, they're strong only when they grounded on the majority countries' values. Yes, so who see the values, the market not only as a market, but who share joint values and things. The countries who are not sharing these values, they are there will be consequences for these countries. And we saw that example with Brexit, that I think can be this situation will provide us solutions. We should look for coalition with our partners, and so to be seen not as competitors but as partner that will strengthen their position, or like countries who can strengthen their supply chains. We should talk to the countries not as who perceive us not as a threat, but as the strong economical partner. Only by acting like this, we can overcome those challenges. The challenges are, I would call them symptomatic so far, because war was a kind of a shock for EU also, and opening this of this solidarity routes, all this full liberalization of Ukraine for Ukrainian import, it was a shock moment that a market wasn't able to regulate fast. So that's this is the like the aftermath in the reaction of certain countries is quite understandable, because these are the players who were not able to adopt. But the function of EU is to help to regulate the situation, and our task is to be as much pragmatical as possible, and not to be good partners with to the EU institutions, and uh, together around us coalition of other members and I think that Ukrainian agrarian sector is very pleased with the role of Ministry of Agriculture when they are trying to prepare sound solutions, and not always we are lucky in finding solutions, because like we were caught up in the Polish internal political process, and so and like for example we have to deal with very politicized opinion of our partners in Hungary. So I will not take your time, because a lot of correct things were said by my colleagues. I want for us uh, to see EU from the point of view of coalitions, of finding coalition partners, and principle of equal opportunities. And these are not words, but these are quintessence of the functioning of EU from 1991. So and we should operate within those definitions, because if we talk again about the blockade of Ukrainian truckers, because the uh, the biggest dream of Polish truckers is to return the practice of quotas, because but what does it mean? It means it's to go back from the uh, uh, from the unified rules for everyone to the administrative regulation, which is uh, but Polish truckers, they forget that these equal rules, forget that they allowed Polish truckers to achieve 20% of trucking business in the EU. So if if they're concerned about the fair access and competitions, we are ready to talk about how we can um, uh, make equal our opportunities, how we can equalize this situation. But the demand to return to the quotas for transport, it means cutting it's a return to the past, and normally it's never possible to return to the past. So we should look solutions and compromises. And uh, thank you for opportunity to conduct such fruitful discussions. Thank you to everyone. And
Я хочу власне
I intentionally didn't want to
операційного відділу максимально це все
to
перетворити
stop
в
our
тексти,
colleagues, and
в якісь
I
відео
will ask
на рівні
colleagues from the
робочих
communication department to
Я майже
prepare
всі
maybe certain
досліджую
clips
всі дискусії модерую.
of uh,
Ця була
of the speakers,
однією з
and
найзмістовніших, якщо не найзмістовніших
I would say like
оскільки ми їх проводимо від початку
this is
вторгнення. Я дуже
this
дякую
discussion was very thoughtful,
Ми докладемо
and
зусилля до того, щоб
we will do our best to
приєдналися і
for those thoughts to reach as much wider audience as possible. And
дуже дякую всім. Бажаю
thank you very much.
спокійного вечора.
I wish everyone a safe
Хто
evening.
запустив міги, вірніше, 3 штуки.
So
І сподіваємося, для тих, хто
Russian mix
ввечері
already landed, and
найкращого. І
have a safe evening.
в цьому форматі
And
бажаю всім хорошої зустрічі нового року. До побачення.
seasonal greetings to everyone.